Hi world, it's Keely and I am back for another video. This is going to be my best books of 2025 video. I don't think I've filmed any of these in previous years, even though I've wanted to. I don't know why I never did, but I actually sat down last night and I went through every book I've read so far this year, which has been well over 100 books, which is not normal for me. I normally read about 100 books a year if I'm having like a good reading year. But this year I just did so much more reading. I also had 6 weeks off work earlier in the fall, so that accounts for a massive surge in how many books I finished. But we recently went to Costco and they had a deal. I don't know if they still have it, but they had a deal on an HP Sprocket, which is one of those little tiny printers that people use for their reading journal to print out like little tiny covers of their books so they can put them in their reading journal. And it was on my list to get for next year, just like as a thing I thought would be cute to have. And then when we were at the store, I was like, hold on. And I looked up comparing it because it was the Sprocket and it ended up being 60 pages of the like sticker paper for I think $79, which is so cheap compared to how much it was on Amazon. So I bought it and I was able to put all the little covers for my favorite books of the year, and it's adorable. I'm having a great time using it. We'll definitely be using it throughout this next year in my reading journal. But I did all of that, and because I was able to like sit down and do all of them, I then was showing my husband going through. So here's like a sneak peek of what it ended up looking like. I did end up counting wrong and accidentally printing one cover twice, so my number is a little bit weird, but that's okay. Let's just dive in. I've been talking a lot. So these are my favorite books that I've read in 2025. The first one that I want to talk about is an audiobook that I listened to. Now I have the physical copy of this book, but I got an audiobook version because it's narrated by the author and that made it so much fun to listen to. This is Unruly by David Mitchell. This is his most recent book that came out within the last couple years. It is his first like foray into history writing. He has a history degree, and I think it was like during lockdown that he actually finally sat down and wrote this one. And this is a history of England's kings and queens, and it was just like the perfect fun history audiobook to listen to. I listened to a lot of it with my husband in the car and he also really enjoyed it, and it's just David Mitchell's humor and him talking about history, which is like two of my favorite things, and it was just a super duper fun one. I really enjoyed it. If you're looking for a fun, easy to read history nonfiction, would definitely recommend that one. The next one that I absolutely loved reading this year was Sick Houses by Laila Taylor. This one was incredible. This one looks at what property, like types of buildings we use in horror and what makes them so scary for us. And the author starts with talking about like the stereotypical haunted house, like talking about The Exorcist and this idea of like you can do everything right. You can pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you can have a nuclear family and you can do all of that and still not be safe, and how that is so terrifying to like this American ideal and why it was so terrifying at the time when those movies were like first coming out, like Amityville and all of those, and then moves into haunted hotels, haunted doll houses, haunted like those big tower like utopia buildings that would have like stores on one level and a library on another level, and this idea that you never have to leave your building because it's wonderful, and how movies like A Clockwork Orange use one of those real life examples to show how terrifying it can be when like even a small piece of the system breaks down. I just had such a great time. As a horror fan, it was a wonderful book to read, and as you know, if you're interested in architecture at all, I would also recommend this one because it was so fascinating about like the different types of buildings that people live in and use and what about them can make them so terrifying to the public. And then the third nonfiction that I want to talk about is The Lost King by Philippa Langley. So I read 2 Philippa Langley books at the beginning of the year. The first one was The Princess in the Tower, and the second one was her searching for the skeleton of Richard III. And I had such a great time reading both of these books. Now, Philippa is, I mean, like any person that is passionate about history, has her opinion on what happened to the princes in the tower, and is pretty convinced that she knows what happened. If you don't know anything about that story, it's super fascinating. Basically, the heir to the throne were put in the Tower of London, and then as children, and then they disappeared, and we don't know what happened to them, but there's been lots and lots of theories. And so that was the Princes in the Tower. And then the Lost King is her looking for the body of Richard III. And it was so fascinating because I remember seeing this in the news when it happened, that they actually did find his skeleton. Spoiler, they found his skeleton in a car park, like underneath a car park. And I remember that being in the news and thinking like, wow, that's crazy. And so I actually then read the book of her kind of detailing the whole process along with the history of Richard III. It was weird because basically what happened was like she was convinced that he was buried in this one area. And she describes how she's like walking across this car park out of like a social service, like outside a social service building, and just gets this vibe that he's buried right here. And that's kind of how she explains it, is like she just had this like overwhelming sense of like there's a body here. And it turns out she was right. And I just found that so weird and so fun to read about. So I had a great time reading that one. Now we can move into all of the fiction. I read a lot of fantasy this year that I had such a fun time with. I read some horror that I had a lot of fun with, but the majority of the ones on my list are going to be fantasy. The first one I want to talk about is the start of a new series, and this is Anna James Chronicles of Weatherwhy, The Age of Enchantment. This is a middle grade about this brother and sister that have different levels, different types of magic, and they end up kind of uncovering like the different political systems and how the world that they live in is functioning, and this one school that trains people that have specific types of magic. And it was so much fun and so cozy because I remember talking about it in my wrap up when I read this one earlier this year, but at no point are the adults like treating the kids as if their opinions don't matter. Like the kids have feelings and they have thoughts and opinions, and they share them with the adults, and the adults want to listen, and they talk to them, and they apologize when they're being rude or mean to the kids, when they're mistreating them. It was just such like an experience I didn't have as a kid that I was like, oh my god, this is so wonderful. I love this so much. So it was an incredibly comforting book to read. I absolutely loved it. Very much looking forward to the next one, which I believe comes out next year. Another super cozy one was Welcome to the Hyeonam-dong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-rum. This one was wonderful. I had such a great time with this one. This one is about a woman who leaves her marriage and leaves her career and decides that her calling in life is to open a bookstore. And she opens this bookstore, and you're really following her like day to day as she's like curating the books that she's going to have in the store. She's learning how to run a bookstore, learning how to be a successful business owner, as she's hiring people to help her in the store, befriending locals, and kind of learning more about her as a person and where she fits in the world. There were so many like big like philosophical existential commentary moments in this book about life that it was just unbelievably comforting and validating. And I definitely think this is one that I will reread in the future because I had such a great time with it, and at different points had to like stop and be like, oh shit. Like, you know, it just hit so hard at different points, talking about your place in the world and whether you are, you know, designed to just be a worker or if you can have like a more fulfilling life and what that means. And of course, because it takes place in a bookstore, that was also just an amazing experience reading it. So I had a lovely time with this one. Would definitely recommend. And I read a couple of like quirky, fun romance books, and one of them was Dating and Dragons by Kirsty Boyce. She wrote, I think it was Dungeons and Drama, which was the first book in this like, so far there's only 2. I don't know if she's gonna do more. They're not really related other than that it's about couples playing Dungeons and Dragons and that being like a main theme of the book. I had such a fun time reading this one. I loved Dungeons and Drama, and this one was also just such a solid, really fun romance book that has to do with Dungeons and Dragons. And I am in a couple campaigns with my friend group and my husband, and we have been for years, and it was so cute and so fun. And I don't remember a ton of it because I read a lot of stories this year about like teenage to college age girls and their relationship with their family. So I can't remember if what I'm thinking of was from this book or from another one, but I just remember it made me feel like so cozy, and I had such a fun time reading this one. So I would definitely recommend it if you're interested in Dungeons and Dragons at all. The next one that I read then that kind of falls into this like weird romance was Dating and Dismemberment by A.L. Brody. I had to like look to see who the author was. This one is the first in a series, and it's about monsters, and this one monster has decided that she doesn't really want to be like the big feared monster in her particular area anymore. In this world, the monsters have certain areas that they are known for. So like the woods are her area, and the lake is his area, and the mountains are this person's area, and there's like a database with like maps of these different territories. And the main character decides that she just wants to like take a break. She doesn't really want to follow in her parents' footsteps of being kind of like this monster that hunts kids in the woods. And because of that, other monsters then are trying to hone in on her territory and take that area for themselves. The book is really following her as she's also dealing with living with her mother, who right now is just a disembodied head that is like very bullying and like demands that she have her, you know, take care of her throughout the day. And then this other monster that shows up, and he starts trying to hunt in her area. Like the population that also is hunted in that area are like teenagers at summer camp because their cabins are in this area. It was just so much fun and so silly, and I really had a great time with the two of them kind of enemies to lovers a little bit, and deciding this kind of like self-growth moment of like, do I want to follow my parents' footsteps? Do I want to be this evil monster? Does it fulfill me? I just thought it was so much fun. And the next book I thought was going to come out at the end of this year, but I don't know if I just misremembered that or if it was always set for another year, but there are supposed to be more books, so I'm very excited to read any subsequent books. I also read earlier this year the first book in a new series from Martha Wells. So the first book was Witch King, and I had such a fun time with it. The second book, Queen Demon, has already come out, and I definitely need to get to that soon before it's too much time has passed. And I don't remember enough of it and the world building to be able to explain it to you, other than it has to do with systems of magic and being able to take on the body of other people, and there's like these political factions and war, and I had such a fun time with it. I might honestly reread Witch King and then go right into Queen Demon, because now it has been about a year since I read the first one, and I don't remember a ton, but I had a fun time with it. I love Martha Wells' writing. This is now book like 10, I think, of hers that I've read, because I've read all of the Murderbot Diaries books multiple times. So I'm very excited to continue on with the series and to read more of her backlog. This one was just super duper fun. A book I read very recently, like within the last few weeks, was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is the first book in the Wayfarers series, and I have all the other books on my Kindle. I have all of her books. I have read the Monk and Robot books and absolutely loved them, and I've heard amazing things about this series. I've owned copies over the years, physical copies and ebook copies, and so I wanted to read another sci-fi, and so I decided to pick up that one, and I had such a fun time with it. This one is like a futuristic, you're following this woman who is running from something, and she ends up getting a job on this ship where they go and do different jobs, and she is kind of like the admin person. She's going to keep track of all of the budgeting and all of that for this crew, and it's made up of different creatures and beings in the universe, not just humans, but all kinds of aliens and other beings. And the crew is so fun to learn about. I really, really enjoyed it. I love the dynamics of everyone. This is one where the kind of two main characters, which is the woman and then the man that runs the ship, it's not like they're just friends. Like, there's no relationship between the two of them. They have their own people. It's just them living together on this ship and determining, you know, how are they going to fit. I thought it was incredible. If you know anything about this story, though, you know that this was not the right time for me to be reading this particular series, because of the relationship that some of the characters have with their dads, because my dad just died at the end of November, and so I was like, hey, maybe this is not a great time to read, you know, continue to learn about these people and their relationship with their dads. So later in 2026, I will continue on with the series, because I did really love it, but it's just not the time for me to keep reading it right now. One that I read earlier in the year and I had such an amazing time with it was The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Katherine Arden. I picked up this one because of Emma from Emmy Reads. She had read it and said that it was incredible, and I decided to pick it up. And this one is a very kind of atmospheric war story about this woman who is a nurse during wartime, and I think it's her brother is a soldier and he has gone missing, and she's just trying to figure out like what happened to him. There's also kind of like these other spooky mythical being type things that are, you know, existing in this universe, and it was such a tense, really emotional story, and I had a wonderful time reading it. And I definitely think it's one that I will go back to in the future and reread because I was so immersed in the story and loved it so much. And I also want to read Katherine Arden's other books because I've also heard very good things. So I had a great time with that one. I don't typically read a lot of historical fiction, but if it's got like a weird, creepy element to it, I'm more inclined to pick it up, and I'm very happy that I read that one. I also continued on with the Amari series from B.B. Alston. So the third book has come out. The fourth book comes out next year. So I read book 2 and 3 this year. I think that's what it was. It's either 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, and then the next book comes out. And the one that I included in my book journal as a favorite was Amari and the Despicable Wonders, which was absolutely incredible. Amari is this super fun middle grade series about this little girl named Amari, and in the first book, her older brother goes missing. And at the time, people in the community are very much like, oh, he probably got into drugs and whatever because he's a black male and that's what they do. And it's pretty terrible. And Amari is just convinced that like she knows her brother more than these people, obviously, and he would never do that, and something must have happened to him. And then begins the story of Amari discovering what happened to her brother and kind of coming into herself and some of her relationships with her friends and her mom. If you enjoy the Nevermore series with Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend, I highly recommend that you pick up Amari because Amari is so different and so much fun. But again, it's like that middle grade, you know, a young girl has magical powers and is fighting the universe kind of thing. It's so much fun. Then I decided to restart a series and just plow through it earlier this year, and that was the Greta Helsing series by Vivian Shaw. The first book is Strange Practice, so this is the one that I included in my journal to represent this entire series. And I reread Strange Practice and then continued on with the next couple books and the novella. This series is completed according to the author, and I don't know what the author's working on now. I'm so bummed because I love this series so much. Greta Helsing is inspired by Van Helsing kind of story where Greta, instead of being a vampire hunter, is a doctor for monsters. And she, I think, is supposed to be the granddaughter of like Van Helsing. And you follow her in every book dealing with a different type of monster and a different type of thing that's existing in their world. So Greta is a doctor. She has like a building where like a clinic that she works with the monsters, and it exists in like regular like human everyday times. But there are all kinds of spells and shit on the door of the clinic so that regular humans never find out that there are monsters. And in a couple of the books, you're dealing with the humans kind of realizing that there might be monsters, but it's definitely like in a conspiracy theory kind of way, but they're starting to gain traction, and so you're just trying to like fight back and protect this group of friends. And it's really Greta and her friends, and there's an enemies to lovers at one point with vampires, and there's werewolves and mummies and all kinds of shit. It's so much fun. I love these types of stories. I had such a fun time reading that entire series. Then I started another middle grade series, and this one is the Green Wild series by Perry Thompson. This one is about plant magic, which is like such a buzzword for me. I love plant magic so much. And you're following a little girl who lives with her mom, and one day her mom goes missing, and this little girl is looking for her mom, and she ends up following this cat that like takes her to this, I don't remember if it's in an actual greenhouse or it's a library, it's some building in the first one, and she ends up kind of going into this like alternate universe kind of that exists in her world, and discovering a lot about who her mom is and about who she is and her place in the world. She gets introduced to a lot of different people, and she gets taken care of by people, and it's like this mystery of uncovering what happened to her mom. And I had such a bomb-ass time reading this one. As soon as I was done, I immediately went to the store and picked up the next one, which is in my pile of books to get to in January. There are 3 books in this series. I don't know if that's it or if there will be more, but it was a lot of fun. Just having a really, really fun time reading all of these like middle grade series about girls with magic. It's so much fun. The next one that I'm going to talk to you about is one that you'll probably have seen all over BookTube this year, and that is the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I specifically chose for this one the Anarchist Cookbook, which I think is book 3 or 4. I am now up to book 6, The Bedlam Bride. So far, 7 books are out. The 8th book comes out hopefully in June of 2026. I have been having such a fun time reading this series, as basically everyone else has on the internet. And I started reading it because my husband read it. He started reading it last year, and he plowed through all 7 books and then immediately restarted listening to the audiobook version and listened to all 7. And he'd been talking about it so much and trying to get me to read them. So I finally did, and I've been having a really, really fun time. I loved the Anarchist Cookbook. This is one where my husband warned me might be very confusing to follow because it takes place in kind of like a subway system. That's what level Carl is on, and I ended up really, really loving it. It was difficult to follow because it's very expansive and confusing, and the tracks will change and all of that stuff. But it reminded me a lot of the SEPTA system in Philadelphia, the public transit system. And so because of that, I kept imagining that Carl was like waiting for the train and on like the platform in Philly, and that made it a lot of fun. So I really, really enjoyed that one. I will say, and I've said a couple times as I've gotten through these books, that there are things that the author does when he's writing about women or about specific groups of people that I don't love. I know that it's supposed to be like the aliens that have taken over the earth, their perspective, which is very, very like stereotype heavy and all of that, but it just feels crappy to read about as a person with mental health issues and as a woman. So I'm just kind of over it. But I've just been ignoring that stuff and pushing through because I do love the world building. A lot of the character development is amazing. I love some of the character design, and because it's like another, you know, dungeon crawler, Dungeons and Dragons, kind of that type of universe, I'm really, really loving it. I guess I should say, if you know nothing about Dungeon Crawler Carl, where have you been? But it's also fair if you don't. If you don't. This is a fantasy universe where there's Carl, who's the main character, and one day he's taking care of his ex-girlfriend's cat, and the cat gets outside. He goes outside to get the cat, and then every building in the world collapses, and anyone that was in the buildings is dead, and anyone that was outside of the buildings is now listening to an alien voice. The alien overlords are talking and basically say like, hey, you guys suck, we're taking Earth back, and so what we're going to do is create a dungeon system if you want to survive. And it's actually a game show, and if you go into the dungeon, you have to like find an entrance, go into the dungeon, and the game begins. And Carl is like, okay, and so he takes the cat and they go into the dungeon, and then each book is another level of the dungeon, and it's just a lot of fun. So very much enjoying that one. Then I read 2 middle grade that were like so emotional. Actually, I read 3 middle grade that were incredibly emotional. The first one that I read was Dear Mothman by Robin Gao. This one won all kinds of awards, and for good reason. It was absolutely incredible. This one is about a little boy whose best friend dies. And his best friend is trans, and so is, I'm pretty sure so is the main character, the little boy. And before his best friend died, they were supposed to be working on a school project together. And his best friend was obsessed with cryptids, specifically Mothman. And after he dies, the little boy that is left is very emotional, obviously, and really wants to complete this project on Mothman on behalf of his friend. And so he writes letters to Mothman, and it is just so unbelievably emotional about this kid trying to understand what happened and how it impacts their life moving forward and their own identity, and befriending Mothman. And it was just, oh my god, I don't typically like cry when I read books, but this one got me pretty close. Like, it was so emotional, so beautiful. I just loved it. Oh my god, one of my top favorites of all time ever, I would say. Then after that, I read one that was super fun, and this one was Midsummer Mayhem by, oh, the author's name isn't on the cover. I don't remember who the author is for this one, but you will see the cover here. And this one was unbelievably fun. This one is about a little girl that is obsessed with baking, and that's all that she wants to do. And one day her dad starts to behave really weird. Like, he starts having memory issues and he's just talking in a weird way. And the little girl decides that she is going to kind of try to figure out what's happening, and she has some ideas about what's happening, and she enters this baking contest because this new bakery has shown up and she wants to enter this contest, and everything is like intertwined. She has siblings and they fight with the neighbor kids, and it was just so much fun. I really loved it. I had a great time learning about the girl. Oops, sorry, I kicked my tripod. I had a great time learning about the girl, the main character, and her dad, and just her getting to like cultivate her love of baking. I thought was so fun. I had a great time with this one and would highly recommend it. I then read another middle grade that is another award winner, and this one is When the Mountain Meets the Moon by Grace Lin. This one is kind of based in Chinese mythology, and is about this girl that grows up in a very impoverished family, and this whole area is very impoverished, and they harvest rice, and that's how they survive, and they have very little to eat, and they don't really have money for extra of anything. And the little girl is told stories by her dad, and the mom is kind of like, don't tell her stories, and like, she's a little kid, shut up. Her dad tells her a story about the man in the moon, and how if you reach the man in the moon, you can ask him for anything and he will grant you a wish. And so the little girl wants to help her family, and so she runs away to try to find the man in the moon so that she can ask him for, you know, comfort in her life, and so that her parents will be comfortable and not have to struggle and not live in poverty anymore. And on her way, going through the mountain, she ends up uncovering a dragon, and the dragon becomes her friend, and the two of them search for the man in the moon, and it is so cute and so beautiful, and I just loved it. It was an absolutely like amazing story. I read so many really good middle grade books this year. Really loved that one. The final two books that I have to talk to you about, these ones were kind of hard to narrow down, but I decided I was just going to go with it. The first one is The Fated Sky, which is the second book in the Lady Astronaut series by Mary Robinette Kowal. So the first two books are a duology, that's what the author has said, because they're about the same characters. There are additional stories in this universe, so there's technically 4 books, I think, or 5 books, but only the first 2 are specifically about this one main character and her husband. It is set in like the 50s, and a massive asteroid hits the eastern part of the United States and wipes out the entire eastern part of the United States. And the surviving people are trying to figure out, like, what happened? How do we survive? There's no government left because government in the United States is housed in Washington, D.C., which is on the eastern side of the United States. That's gone. And is Earth going to remain inhabitable? The main character, Claire, I think her name's Claire, is an astronaut. She's a scientist, and so is her husband. He's an engineer. They work for NASA, and the two of them are brought in on all of these expeditions to figure out, like, should we go to the moon? And like, can we live on the moon instead of Earth? Because Earth kind of sucks right now. But because it is the 50s and she's a woman in STEM, she's treated like shit. And the first book really pissed me off with all of that, all of the sexism, which is like part of it. It's the point is that it's supposed to piss you off at how ridiculous it all is, because she's incredibly talented, but is constantly talked down to because she's a woman. Not by her husband though. Her husband's incredible. But in book 2, you're continuing on with her and her husband and some of the people that they encountered in book 1, and you're just like really moving away from the initial event of the asteroid, and now you're seeing kind of the ripple effects of what that is doing to the rest of Earth, as well as the issues that it's causing politically, because all of the existing political issues are now exacerbated by what is happening to the climate and to the planet. And it was so wonderful. I loved book 2. Book 2 was like a 17 out of 5 and book 1 was a 5 out of 5. It was so good. Absolutely loved this one. The final one that I want to talk to you about is one that I read earlier on in the year, and this is from one of my favorite authors ever, H.G. Perry. This one is The Scholar and the Last Fairy Door. I read this one when we went to Florida for my mother-in-law's wedding, and I had such a great time reading like only this book the entire vacation. And we spent a lot of time in the car going from one part of Florida to another part for the wedding with some family. And I read like almost the entire time in the car. And then when we were at family's house, I read the entire time while everyone else was just kind of hanging out and relaxing. This one was so fun. Fantasy story about, I think is it a brother and sister? It's been a long time. I think it's about a brother and sister, and there is the potential for, like, the brother has disappeared and they're trying to figure out what happened to him, and obviously there's fairies, and I can't remember a ton of it, but I remember having such a bomb-ass time with it. I'm so sorry that I get, like, really suck at describing books, but the vibes were perfect. I love H.G. Perry's writing. I've now read almost all of her books. I had such a great time with this one and would highly recommend any of H.G. Perry's books, but this one was a more recent one, and I just had such a fun time with it. So again, sorry that I suck and can't remember a ton from earlier this year, but I had a lot of fun with it. I read a lot of books in 2025. I'm still in the middle of like 4 or 5 books that I'm hoping to finish up in the next couple days, which probably won't happen because it's Christmas Eve right now and I have lots to do over the next couple days. But I wanted to talk to you guys about my favorites, ask you what your favorites were, because I'm always looking for more books to add to my TBR. Did you read any of these books in 2025 or earlier? Do you enjoy them? Yeah, if you made a video about your favorite books, let me know, or just list them down below. That's cool too. And I just wanted to say thank you guys for watching throughout the year. Really appreciate you. Hope that you have a wonderful holiday season in any capacity, however you celebrate. If you don't, I also just hope that you're doing okay, and I will catch you in the next one.